Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about 384 pages, which is the Game Informer announced length of every single one of the Infinite Editions. Soon, literally in like a couple months, we're going to start receiving the 2024 core rule books, the last edition of Dungeons & Dragons ever, because it creates one edition. We're getting to fully embrace exactly what was promised, which was one D&D. No more editions. There are eras where we played Dungeons and Dragons with different, and there was so this is the new understanding. Yeah, and I already said it. We're going to talk about this 380 pages, 384 pages for every single core rule book this year. Okay, but I cannot stress this enough. We have to abandon the word edition. It has to be gone. And the reason why is what's happening now is incredibly important for Dungeons and Dragons, but it's more important for humanity. Like, basically, you and I are grizzled veterans of the edition wars, and we had our virtual sword and our virtual shield, and we hacked each other, and it's right here on this channel. It's on Twitter. You can see virtual flames, virtual tears, and virtual blood over the edition wars. It raged for a long time. Now, Dungeons & Dragons is like one D&D. And what they're saying is they're like, listen, we're not going to 6th edition, right? And what we're doing is you're getting the player handbook in 2024. And the reality is you had the player handbook in 1984. You had the player handbook in 1994. You had the player handbook in 2004. You had the player handbook in 2014. It was always the player handbook. It was always the monster manual. It was always the DMG. And so to say this is 1st edition and it's awesome, and everybody who plays 5th edition, you all suck and we're awesome. Let's forget the fact that you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. All right. They're saying this division is ludicrous. It's just the player's handbook. It's eternal. It's infinite, right? I agree, right? And it is like the greatest attempt at peace that can actually land, right? There's people right now working on a piece that is not going to stick, is going to go right into the same dumpster fire it's always gone into, right? Like, it's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating, but like, we can accomplish something in art that we failed to do on the non-artistic side, on the, on the fit. We can succeed in doing something on the, I want to say intangible, but D&D is no longer intangible. It's quite tangible. Wow. Woo! Things are changing fast, man. It's so incredible. This is an attempt at peace, to end the edition wars. Lay your virtual sword down, lay your virtual shield down. It's just the player's handbook. And when we get to 2024 player's handbook, that Game Informer just revealed Tyler Jacobson's amazing cover for. Amazing cover, okay? Amazing cover, right? That really excited the world. Literally an international, global story, right? It's astounding. All right, so let's start talking about 384 pages. Okay, so first of all, I'm sorry, there's just so much. I'm so excited about this. So basically, Game Informer comes in, and Game Informer is a real magazine. I did the research. It's really still printed, right? And they're charging $2 an issue. That's outrageously low for a magazine, right? And they're shipping that physical magazine to real houses, right? And people sit down and they read that thing on a rainy Sunday afternoon. That's real, right? And what blew my mind was, like, Dungeons & Dragons is so important, right? So Game Informer, they're like, hey, man, we have this magazine, but we got to report about video games. Wah, wah, wah. Nobody cares, right? Like, and the reality is the world cares, but, like, it's just a big pancake pile of nothing, right? Like, video games really don't produce art, in my humble opinion. They produce a lot of activity. They produce like sentences and paragraphs that look like stories but aren't stories, but the reality, and so But Game Informer got incredibly excited. They're like, we understand that the vast majority of our thumb twiddling is literally given to us by Gary Gygax, and that everything good in video games came straight out of Dungeons & Dragons. And get this, I looked it up. I had a hard time finding it someday, but I remember reading it. And if any of you can send me the source, I would love it. I would love to actually get my hands on this specific Game Informer. But we got Game Informer for quite a few years, and I threw it out because it was filled with video game stuff. I threw it out after everybody in the house had read it for 3 months, right? Like, so I don't have those old Game Informers. But there was one where it was, these are the best video games in the world. Like, it was a top 100, and it literally ended with Dungeons and Dragons, and not Dungeons and Dragons as a video game. Literally 100 to 1 to 2 were video games, right? The top 100 video games. And they said, hey, Dungeons and Dragons is the #1 video game in the world. And they're like, yeah, we know it's not a video game, but everything we do, none of it would work without, everything, like leveling, questing, quest givers, like everything we do is just a shadow of what Gary established in 1974. Everything good, right? And all our attempts to create narrative have been horrible, right? So that's why we keep going back, and literally, like, when they went back to the well, everybody was like, oh yeah, of course, D&D is not just the best fantasy game, it's not the best D&D game. Baldur's Gate in 2023 was the best game, because just rub something against Dungeons & Dragons and it's going to be better than any garbage from any AAA studio ever, right? And like, we proved it. Like Gary's legacy is stronger than any video game designer alive, right? Like, it's astonishing, right? Like, all right, let me stay focused here. All right, so Game Informer gets really excited. They send a team, not just one reporter, a team to Renton, Washington, and they actually like really dug in and treated it like a real story. It really feels like a cultural event. You know why? Because it is. And I am starting to think, well, first of all, I don't need to tell you that Dungeons and Dragons Infinite Edition, the Infinite PHB, the Infinite, the 2024, call it what it is, Infinite PHB, Infinite DMG, Infinite MM, is hugely important, right? And we're all like, oh yeah, well, I don't need to tell you it's going to be big in the tabletop role-playing game. You know how I could tell you it's going to be huge in the tabletop role-playing game sphere? Professor Dungeon Master. Professor Dungeon Master, in my humble opinion, absolutely despises Dungeons and Dragons. He constantly covers Dungeons and Dragons and tells you, hey, your physical book's going to die and it's just going to be digital now, and D&D sucks, and I really dislike that D&D continues to win constantly, right? And you could just see him grind his teeth on every Dungeons and Dragons win, right? But the wild thing is, he said it. He's like, I have a tabletop role-playing game, and I'm pushing it to 2025 because this thing, because he's like, the new rule books, the new core rule books are going to suck all the air out of the room for every OSR and indie product. Every single one. Everything on the OSR and the indie will drop like a lead balloon, because every bit of attention will go to these new books. I'm saying it's going to be bigger than that. I think we're really looking at a cultural moment, right? The Blockbuster, Baldur's Gate, Stranger Things, Lego, all are banner carrying for Dungeons & Dragons. And Dungeons & Dragons is like, we're here for 50 years. We just finished 50. We're about to do another 50. The whole world can join us for this party. And I think people outside the D&D sphere are looking over and going, holy cows. We see a bunch of charismatic, confident, smart people, intelligent people having a party, and we want in. Like, can we come in, right? And we're like, yeah, come on in, man. So it's like, it's huge, right? Sorry, I'm getting really excited. Let me get to my main point here. All right, let's talk about 384 pages. Huge. The DMG, the MM, and the PHB, we now know their length. It was printed in Game Informer as a piece of international news, a hard news fact, right? And so each one of them are going to be 384 pages. This is a very, very big deal. Why? Okay. First of all, that number is massive. I'm pretty sure it's larger than it means now that the new core rule books, every single one of the 3 core rule books is longer than the longest 2014. The 2024 PHB will be longer than the 2014 PHB. The 2024 DMG will be longer than the 2014 DMG. The 2024 MM will be longer than the 2014 MM. That's astounding. That is truly astounding. And it means that the initial ante to be a dungeon master or a dragon master, to actually understand Dungeons and Dragons and participate in it, is 1,152 pages. That is astonishing. It is an incredible wall to hurdle, right? And there was discussion. There really was discussion about, hey, we want to bring in, new people. And so the reality is, we're not getting that answer from Hasbro. Hasbro is like, we are going hard, because I'll tell you right now, you are not going to get muggles. The muggles are arriving. They're like, hey, we're here for the party. And you're like, come on in, right? And they're like, okay, what do we do now? And you're like, it's 384 pages of reading, 384 pages of reading, 384 pages of reading. It's like walking into a party and somebody throws a cold glass of water in your face. If you're not hyper literate, hyper smart, right? And hyper dedicated, which the rest of the world is not, right? So it is a problem from one perspective. There is some good news about it. One, every single one of them is going to have more art than the old books. And that's one of the reasons why they're longer, right? So there's also a possibility that they don't have any more words in them. They may actually have less words in them, right? But it's not going to matter, right? Those books are going to literally, you put them on the table, they're 1,000 pages thick. That thing's going to be 6 inches high, right? It is going to feel more daunting than a college syllabus, right? That's huge. That is a big freaking deal. For years, I'm like I just kept the math simple, and I was like 750 pages of reading, 250 a piece, right? This is over 1,000 pages. In fact, if you have read 1,000 pages, you can go kick rocks. It's not enough, right? You owe me 152 more. It's astonishing. It is an astonishing amount of reading, right? So, one, I'm so excited for this, but I am worried. I am legit worried. That is an astonishing length, right? I am excited, though, that all the books are exactly the same length. I think the reason they did that was so that the printer they went to, it was going to be on rails, because they're going to be chunking these things out like a stonemason chunks out bricks, right? Or actually stone to build a building with, right? They're going to crank on these, right? There's a possibility. Oh my gosh, holy cows, we could have a midnight book release. I think we're about to go back to a midnight book release. And if you are everywhere you are, I'm going to do this in my area. You should start doing this in your area. Call your local bookstore, right? This is my idea. You don't have to do this. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell you to do it, right? Do as you wish. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to call every local bookstore in my area and say, hey, do you have a midnight books? And say what snacks are going to be at the midnight book? Yeah. What's the best way to ask this? I'm going to say, oh, am I allowed to come in costume to your midnight book release for the 2024 Player's Handbook. And they're like, what? I'm saying, well, the new Dungeons and Dragons book's coming out, just like, the Harry Potter books. You guys are having a midnight book release, right? Am I allowed to come in costume? And they, and one, I know this is going to be a weird conversation, because they're going to be like, they might say we don't have it, or they might go, hold on, right? And they go back and say to the boss, hey, are we having a midnight book party for, the D&D book? And then because they are book people, there's a good chance they know what it is. And they'll be like, so this is going to be huge. I am worried about the length, but I wanted to get in here and just start talking this through with you. 384 pages, that's a lot, right? Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments, and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.